This is draft season. Hello, everybody. Hope everyone's had a great holiday. I am John Schmelke. Is Tony Pauline. Draft season is brought to you by Moody's, a proud sponsor and partner of the New York Football Giants. Tony, you can find all his work at Essentially Sports. Tony, hope you had a good holiday, my friend.
It was fantastic. A little bit too short, as it's always too short. I hope you and your family had a good one. It's funny. I was thinking about this before the show. When you're a kid, it's always Christmas Day. When you have kids, young kids, it's always Christmas Day. But the older you and your kids get, at least in my family, Christmas Eve in the Pauline household is the big thing with the 7 or 8 fishes, whatever the heck we do. And Christmas Day is also nice. But yeah, it was great. I hope everyone else out there had a great holiday.
Yeah, Christmas Eve is kind of that's when we have all the family over the house and we do like our Christmas Eve together. And then Christmas is kind of more of like just the main family, kind of like a sleepy day. We kind of just roam around the house all day and hang out. So I guess that's kind of where we're at too, though the kids obviously get very excited for Christmas morning. Though you know, they get all of their gifts from like their cousins and their aunts and their uncles on Christmas Eve. So
Yeah.
it's kind of balanced, to be honest with you. Both days are pretty good. They're pretty spoiled.
Nonstop go. I remember when my daughter was young, at one point in time, she was maybe 2 years old. She actually got tired of opening gifts and she started playing with chapstick. And there was still a mound of gifts that had to be opened. So, hey, it is what it is.
So my wife flew with my 2 kids, to visit her family in Des Moines, Iowa, yesterday. So I'm alone for a week, but I was cleaning up the living room last night, which is like my whole night, just trying to make sure when she gets back, the house looks nice, right? And there were like 4 gifts that my 3-year-old, to your point, was just like done. He's like, "I don't open gifts anymore. They're still sitting there in wrapping paper." I'm like, "What are we doing here?" It's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, Tony, very big fun time for college football. It was kind of a sleepy first round of the college football playoffs, but the second round is going to be fantastic. It'll be a lot of fun. We're going to preview those games. We're going to talk about some of the bowl games that already happened. We have a couple Senior Bowl invitations, a couple declarations that I'm going to ask you about, but we're really kind of getting into the home stretch here and then the final few weeks of the college football season. It should be a lot of fun.
That Senior Bowl roster is really taken. It is an impressive roster compared to what the 2026 draft looks like. I was on it last night looking at some of those names, and I was like, "Wow, this is exciting!" I'm looking forward to flying out to Mobile after spending a couple days at Shrine Bowl practice.
Yeah, we can have half the first round get picked from the Senior Bowl, to be honest with you. It's one of those years, Tony, where there aren't that many blue chip underclassmen prospects, which usually are the type of players that forego the Senior Bowl. Since those guys don't really exist in mass in this year's draft class, and I think there's so much mobility in terms of where guys might get picked and guys think they could help themselves, it's just becoming a much more inviting type of scenario for these players to try to move themselves up so they can make as much money and move up the draft process.
And that's the way it used to be. I mean, Donovan McNabb, Philip Rivers, David Carr, all these guys used to play in the Senior Bowl. Some of them, you go back 25 years, plus 30 years, they would play in both the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl. So it's good to see sort of a return to where we were because, scouts want to see these guys in pads, in one-on-ones, in 7-on-7s, in full scrimmage, playing football.
Yeah, Drew Fabianis has done a great job building on what Jim Nagy had built there, and before that, Joe Banner, correct? Was he who ran Phil Savage? Sorry, wrong former NFL general manager. Phil Savage, he did a good job before Jim Nagy down there. So just a great job by all involved to kind of continue to build that game up and getting the best prospects there possible. We do have 3 more other accepted invitations to the Senior Bowl, Tony, that I want to throw at you. I'll throw all 3 names at you because guys I know we've talked about here a bunch. LT Overton, the edge player from Alabama, will be headed to Mobile to Senior Bowl. Deion Burks, the wide receiver, who you've talked about here as well, he'll be going. And then Caleb Elamzor, the linebacker of TCU, I know you're a big fan of. All 3 players in the last week accepting invitations to the Senior Bowl.
We'll go over reverse. Elamzor, he's a sort of a smaller, explosive run-and-chase linebacker. He's great in pursuit. Want to see him in those coverage drills, especially matched up against those taller tight ends. How does he do? Big fan of his. Came into the season with late round grades. I've always had him as a middle round pick. I think he could be a third rounder. But again, as we've spoken about on the show, off-ball linebacker is one of the strengths of this draft. And he is, in fact, an off-ball linebacker. LT Overton, I think he's been injured, if I'm correct. I don't think he played in that first playoff game. I may have to be checked.
Oh, you're right about that. You're right about
You
that.
know, he's kind of a tweener in the sense that, is he a defensive end? Is he a defensive tackle? He's very explosive. He can rush the passer. Want to see him in those Senior Bowl matchups, especially when he's moved inside in those one-on-ones when he's going up against those big offensive guards. Is he able to get off those blocks, or is he constantly held up at the point? And who was the second guy you mentioned?
Deion Burks, the wide receiver. Yes.
Burks is one. I've had Burks rated higher than most people throughout the process. I think he is. He is a smaller receiver, but he's explosive. He's got return skills. He's feisty. He's dependable. We'll see how fast he is in those one-on-ones. If you want your receiver to be 5'11", 6 foot, 6'2", Deion Burks is not your guy. But if you run a timing offense, you want a guy that runs sharp underneath patterns, underneath routes, guy that catches the ball, that can also double as your return specialist, you got to look towards Burks. I think he's vastly underrated.
We've had also 2 draft declarations. Guys that aren't surprises. Colton Hood, the cornerback out of Tennessee, Tony. A lot of people talk about his teammate, Jermon McCoy. But Hood has had a nice little year, and he'll be heading to the NFL draft.
And I think he's going to end up in the bottom part of round 1. I mean, it's not a good year, cornerbacks. The first one's going to be Delore, but LSU's probably going to be drafted outside the top 10. And if you look at the history of NFL drafts, a lot of strange things happen in those last 12 picks, and it usually has to do with cornerbacks. Now, Colton Hood, this is his third school. He played at Auburn, he played at Colorado, played at Tennessee, got his feet underneath him, had a really terrific season. Scouts are going to ask, why did you bounce around? Why did it take you so long? And there's going to be the concern that, was 2025 a one-off year for Hood, or is this what we're going to see from him moving forward?
No question about it. Then the other draft declaration I want to touch on, wide receiver Denzel Boston from Washington will be heading in. And we kind of saw that coming, to be honest with you. That's not a surprise. I finished my work on him last week, Tony. A lot of Drake London vibes to me, where he's big, really big body. Like, he's a thick player. You don't see much explosiveness and like top end down the field speed and acceleration and suddenness, but he does have some wiggle and change of direction to him where he can get open. So I think he's going to be a guy that we're talking about too, is one of these kind of back end of the first round, top of the second round type of receivers. And like, he's 6'4", like 215. He's a big dude.
I think if you go back with my 2-round mock draft, I had him off the board within the first 5 picks of round 2. And that, he's a big, reliable possession receiver. He's one of those guys where when the ball was in the air for Washington's offense, 50% of the time, the opponents knew the ball was heading to Denzel Boston's direction, and they couldn't stop him. And he plays big football. He uses his frame well to shield away defenders. But you're right. There's not a lot of quickness there. He's not quick off the line of scrimmage. There are some speed limitations. So, that is the drawback. But you're getting a guy that should be a good red zone threat, should be a dependable receiver on third down, and is a big-bodied pass catcher.
And I would just say, Tony, people don't look at his stats, because when you go back and look at, I watched all his targets this year, and man, the quarterback play, rough, very rough. I mean, he's open a bunch, and the ball is nowhere near him on some of these routes. It was just really, really rough.
I would agree, which, when they were talking about the Michigan job being open, they were talking about Jed Fish. I'm like, yeah, Jed Fish did a great job at Arizona, the head coach of Washington. He's been average at Washington because he can't get the quarterback position right there. I don't know why Fish's name was popping up for all these open jobs.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. And you mentioned it. Well, let me talk about one of the wide receiver first, and this also is not a surprise. Nick Harbor, the South Carolina wide receiver, big, fast, athletic, huge, checks all the boxes. He'll be heading back to school for another year, which I think is the right move for him.
Of course, now he's got he's got his quarterback going back, Lenore Rosello. So yeah, I think the thing about Nick Harbor, and I've been consistent about this, he's a track guy trying to learn to play the receiver position, and he's got a ways to go. I mean, he's a straight line guy. He can overmatch opponents with the physical skills, with the height, but he shows a lot of stiffness in his game. He's got to improve his route running. Going back to school and catching passes from Lenore Sellers next season was definitely the best choice, the best path for him.
And we should mention the other big piece of news around college football, Tony. You mentioned the Michigan head coach situation. They end up landing what I think is you got to be pretty excited if you're a Michigan fan. Kyle Whittingham, who comes over from Utah, he is a very, very, very good head coach. That Utah program is good every year. They play a good, solid brand of football. I think Michigan fans should be excited.
No nonsense guy, nose to the grindstone, disciplinarian. It was a big bump in the road with Sherrod Moore. That was very tough to watch what happened with him. I've always rooted for Moore to hear that whole story and to see him in court was very difficult for me anyway. But I think Michigan made the best choice. I mean, if you weren't getting Matt Campbell, who Penn State hired, which was a good hire, get Willingham. I think that brings instant credibility to a school that's had a lot of problems with breaking the rules and things like that the past couple of years. So I agree with you. You've got to be very happy. It's good for college football.
Yeah, it is. And I think it'll be interesting to see how Whittingham kind of deals with this, right? Because he's kind of recruiting now in a much different way than what he did at Utah, a different type of players in different parts of the country. So I'm always interested to see how these guys, and sometimes it works great that coming from smaller programs and go to these monster programs. I'm curious to see how he adjusts to that difference in terms of how he's going to run the program.
I haven't read this. Maybe is he keeping Wink Martindale?
I have not read that yet, to be honest with you.
That would be an interesting pairing.
Well, let's see. I see a headline here that Kyle Whittingham makes first big decision as head coach in terms of his staff. So let's see. No, I just will retain the running backs coach. So no, that is not that big of a news. See, these headlines, you can't trust them, Tony. Usually they're not that big, but they make them out to be big when they're not. This is kind of how they do things. All right, so let's go to some of the bowls that have been going on here for Tony. But first, a reminder that Draft Season is presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity, learn more on Moody's.com. And Tony, the Xbox Bowl, Missouri State and Arkansas State. I like it. You're pulling here, Tony. What do you got?
And it was played at the Ford Center, if you watched it, where we'll be in a couple of weeks for Shrine Bowl practices. This was a game that was played before Christmas. If you read my stuff over the summer, I said that Jacob Clark, the quarterback from Missouri State that just made the jump up to FBS football, was the top senior prospect from Conference USA, which is basically, like a glorified Division I AA conference right now playing FBS football. Jacob Clark, he was 25 of 35 for 349 yards and 4 TDs in that game. He is your classic pocket passer. He's 6'4.5", 220 pounds. You're not relying on him to run. He's your old style drop back passer. He's very accurate, 71.4% accuracy this year. He was accurate at the lower level. The only problem with him is he throws a lot of interceptions, which is a killer. 28 touchdowns to 11 TDs this season. Tends to force the ball. I don't know that he's going to get drafted. I do know he's going to compete for a number 3 job on a roster next year. I hope we get to see him at the Shrine Bowl, because if the Senior Bowl is loading up on quarterbacks, that may open up a spot for Jacob Clark in a game like the Shrine Bowl.
And Tony, and you like a wide receiver that plays for Arkansas State.
Yeah, Corey Rucker. The guys at Arkansas State, the skill players, they're not big and they're not fast. That's why they're in the Sun Belt or Conference USA. Corey Ruckers is that exact type. He's 6 foot, 208 pounds. He's a mid 4.55 guy, but he catches everything in sight. He's a terrific possession receiver, reliable hands. In this one game against Missouri State, 6 receptions, 166 yards, 1 TD. Did have a long, a 71-yard touchdown reception. 75 receptions for 1,032 yards this year. Again, you're looking at a potential number 5 or even number 6 receiver. If a team keeps 6 receivers on the active roster, running a lot of underneath routes, showing a lot of route discipline, 3rd and 5, he's the guy you got to throw the ball to because he's an exceptional pass catcher.
And Arkansas State did win that game 34-28. All right, Tony, let's go to our next game here, the Hawaii Bowl. Cal and Hawaii. Hawaii win that game 35-31.
Traditionally used to be played on Christmas. You open it, we talk about open up the presents, then 12 o'clock, the Hawaii Bowl would come on. It was like, it was 3 o'clock. It was like 9 o'clock in the morning. Now they play it on Christmas Eve. Cal has 2 players to watch. Jacob DeJesus. He's a smaller receiver, 5'6", 175 pounds, but he runs in the low 4.4s and he plays that fast. He's an exceptional route runner, incredibly productive. 108 receptions for 1,026 yards this year, 6 TDs. In that game against Hawaii, he had 9 receptions for 137 yards with 1 TD. Now, he's got size limitations because he only goes about 5'6", but he's a great pass catcher. He runs great routes. You can't stop him because he's able to separate through his routes. He plays big football too. He doesn't shy away from contact. Uses his frame to shield away defenders. Extends his hands. Has that return ability. Again, if he's drafted, it's going to be very, very late. I do think he'll be signed as a priority free agent, but he's one of those guys that, in the preseason will have a lot of stats as a pass catcher, then break a play or two open as a return specialist on punt returns, and, he'll be the talk of the town as a free agent pickup. The guy to watch there also is Cade Ulavi, the linebacker. Had 9 tackles in this game, 97 tackles this season, 71 a year ago. He's a shorter guy, about 6'1", 230 pounds. You can't miss him. At number 10, he's all over the field making plays. Great in pursuit. Another terrific off-ball linebacker. I know I've been speaking with people in the past couple of days. He's kind of deciding whether or not he's going to enter the draft. Doesn't get a huge NIL deal back in California, so that'll factor into it. But he's terrific in coverage. He's sells out in the blitz, and he just plays like his hair's on fire. Another terrific off-ball linebacker prospect if he enters the draft.
All right, Tony, let's move on to the Rate Bowl. A lot of legend and tradition there. Go Minnesota and New Mexico. That game went into overtime, and I watched a lot of that game, and I just kept thinking about you, Tony, because again, that you've been pushing during this podcast all year long. Anthony Smith, the big defensive tackle out of Minnesota, just absolutely unstoppable in this game.
6 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 12.5 sacks this season. He is a big athletic guy. I have him graded as a second rounder. Needs to get a little bit stronger. Needs to be a little bit sturdier against the run. But I love his athleticism, his pass rush ability, his growth potential. And I think this guy is just a dynamite prospect. He's a lot better in 2025 than he was in 2024. And he was a darn good player in 2024. So he's headed in the right direction.
Yeah, 6'6", 285, Tony. So clearly a lot of size there and some flexibility to play on different parts of the line.
And look how he moves. I mean, he doesn't move like a big, clunky, 280-pound plus guy. I mean, he's fluid, he's smooth, he's explosive. Just a lot to like. Like I said, needs to get a little bit stronger, but that will come as he physically matures. But he's got the great pass rush skills at that size. And you said flexibility. Play end in a 3-man line. You want to line him up as a big defensive end with that athleticism. So there's a lot of things you can do with him.
And then in the disappointing 2025 college football season bowl, also known as the Pinstripe Bowl, taking place in the Bronx, Clemson and Penn State. Penn State wins that game 22-10, Tony, and you were impressed by Dennis Danny Sutton in this game.
Well, the fact is he played, and good for him because I harped on this guy all season. I don't think he basically played to the level that many of us expected him to play to, especially the way he ended 2025 or the beginning of 2024, the beginning of 2025 in the playoffs, when he was basically taking over for Abdul Carter with that bad shoulder. He was hit and miss throughout the season. 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and Clemson did have their starting offensive tackles in that game. Those were some of the few guys from Clemson that didn't opt out of that game. So he deserves credit for playing. Dennis Danny Sutton, he deserves credit for playing well. Wish he had just done this throughout the season and would stop with all the flexing and all the celebrating after he makes a big play.
But Tony, you have finished your Clemson film work on the year, and obviously a lot of players coming out of that school this year. You had a big wide receiver. You got a couple of big players in the defensive front. Just give me your quick impressions. We don't have to go through each guy in great detail. But when you went back and took a closer look at some of these guys that we had rated so high before the year and generally had disappointed during the year, what did you see?
It wasn't due to lack of effort. And these guys are really good players. It's just that the stats weren't there. I didn't see TJ Parker takedowns off I didn't see Peter Woods take downs off. I didn't see Terrell, the cornerback, make a lot of bad plays. I didn't see Williams, the receiver, drop passes. So the talent is there. The question is, why wasn't the production there? You know, it wasn't because these guys skated through the season. I didn't see that at all. I saw TJ Parker show great pass rush speed off the edge, show the ability to get off the line and play in space, and he did it on a consistent basis. It just didn't make a lot of sacks. He didn't have the production we thought. Peter Woods, I mean, he needs to get a little bit stronger. He's a very explosive first step lineman who was also used as a running back at times. So the potential is there. He's just got to step it up. Antonio Williams was when he was healthy, he was impossible to cover. I mean, he's making plays in the short field and the intermediate field, running outstanding routes, catching the ball well, extending his hands to make the reception away from his frame. I guess the only guy that I was concerned about was Kay Klubnik because he doesn't have the arm strength. And he needs to make plays with his head. And he wasn't making poor choices last year. They had a rash of injuries. You can't use that as an excuse. But, I went into watching a Clemson film with a bad attitude because I expected so much more from them. But when I watched the film, I was like, these guys didn't play poorly despite what the stats sheet said.
You didn't mention your guy Wade Wood as Tony. Come on.
Well, he has an injury, and he was there's a sophomore linebacker there that's kind of taken over the linebacker unit at Clemson. He's smart, he's tough. He is going to be, in my opinion, a real steal as a day 3 pick. He's going to be one of those guys who falls into the 5th, 6th round, but he's a 3-down linebacker. He was good against the run. What really stands out about Wood is his instincts. I mean, you could tell he sees what's going to happen before it actually happens, and he's at the spot to make the tackle before the ball carrier gets there. But he's going to fall a lot later than I think I and others thought he would coming into the season.
All right, let's get to the college football playoff preview here, Tony. First, you have the Cotton Bowl, Miami and Ohio State. This is the standalone game on New Year's Eve, which should be a lot of fun. It should be a great game. And Ohio State, really, Tony, is going to dominate of all the schools the first round this year. And you'll probably get, not probably, you're going to get more first rounders out of Ohio State than any other school this year in the first round. I'd be shocked if that wasn't the case. Correct me if you think I'm wrong on that. And a good matchup against Miami. Both schools have a lot of draft eligible players. What matchup do you want to start with here, Tony?
Well, let's go. I mean, the overall theme of this game is if you watch the Indiana-Ohio State game, Indiana beat Ohio State by running the ball with Hemby and Mendoza coming up big in important spots. Mendoza didn't have a great game. He didn't have a game where he carried his team on the shoulders, say the way Mark Fletcher, the running back from Miami, did a week ago against Texas A&M. And I think that's one of the matchups. I think if you're Ohio State, you got to load the box and you got to let Carson Beck try and beat you. And loading the box means that it's going to be Avril Reese and Sonny Styles, those outstanding linebackers that are going to be top 12 picks in the draft, as well as Caden McDonald, the Ohio State defensive tackle who's really stepped to the forefront this year after stepping into the starting lineup against Mark Fletcher. Because Miami's going to try and run the ball. They're going to try and duplicate what they did against Texas A&M, where Fletcher was the guy basically carried the entire offense that last series. Didn't score the touchdown, but got him into scoring position. And I think, you want to watch that matchup because that's really where Ohio State struggled against Indiana. They couldn't stop the Indiana running game with Hemby, and that opened up the passing game when they needed it. So let's see if Matt Patricia does something different with those linebackers because Mark Fletcher is a bit more talented than Roman Hemby. I like Hemby of Indiana going back to his Maryland days, but Fletcher's a guy, remember, Fletcher was the guy who last year basically put Damian Martinez on the bench with the Miami Hurricanes. Damian Martinez, the big name transfer that came over from Oregon State, was great as a 3rd-round pick. He struggled getting the ball because Mark Fletcher was so outstanding. So that's going to be one matchup to watch.
And look, these two Ohio State linebackers, Tony, they're going to go in the top 15. Sonny Styles and Arvo Reese, they're very good players. Throw in Caden McDonald at nose tackle. That is a really, really dominating front. And we'll talk about some of the guys on the edge for Ohio State as well. But that is really one of the strengths of this Ohio State team, especially that linebacker play. I'm excited to see what they do against a pretty good Miami offense.
And like I said, if I'm Matt Patricia, I'm loading up the box and I'm going to say, okay, Carson Beck, let's see if you can beat us because, Ohio State does have a real good secondary led by Caleb Downs. And you don't know what you're getting with Carson Beck over time. Sometimes he's good, sometimes he's bad, sometimes he digs a hole for his team. But that's what I would do if I was a defensive coordinator.
I smell a Caleb Downs interception in this game of Carson Beck. We'll see if that happens. But Beck has a tendency to sometimes throw to the wrong team, especially when he's pressing a little bit. We'll see how that goes for him. Then you flip it, Tony. Miami with two very good edge rushers, Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor. I'm going to talk a little bit about Mesidor here, Tony, because he's a weird prospect, right? He's going to turn 25 in April, so he's an older prospect. His numbers are a lot better than Bain. He's a big guy. He's 280 pounds. And he's got really good pass rush skills here. So I'll be curious to see where he ends up getting picked with all those, especially with the age being in the mix there in terms of how teams view him as a player.
Also has an injury history, which is why he's 5 years old. So that's going to factor into it. But I mean, if you watch Akeem Mesidor this year or any of the prior 3 years when he was on the field for Miami, you saw an explosive defensive end that fires off the snap and is able to beat defensive tackles, a guy that can bend the edge, can make plays in backside pursuit, a guy who is a constant nuisance. Obviously, having Ruben Bain there on the other side helps him because it takes a lot of the attraction away from him. But I think in everybody's love and lust for Ruben Bain, they tend to forget about Akeem Mesidor, who has been well liked in the scouting community for 3 years now. It's just that the injuries have sidelined him and basically prevented him from becoming the defensive lineman that he finally blossomed into this year.
And these Ohio State offensive tackles, Tony, might not be high draft picks this year, but they're still good players. So it'll be a good one-on-one matchup.
Well, it should, but remember, Indiana, with Mikhail Kamara and the other kid, what's his name, Riley, I think, Mikhail Kamara and Stephen Daly, who's not going to be playing this game, they were able to wreak havoc, and they were able to pressure Julian Sayin and really change the focus of that game. They did it with edge rushing. They did it with a lot of stunts and games up front. And Mesidor and Ruben Bain are head and shoulders better prospects, have higher potential. They're better athletes than Mikhail Kamara and Stephen Daly, who basically just got the maximum, have consistently gotten the maximum from their ability.
Yeah, and we'll see how Julian Sayin, who obviously not draft eligible this year, handles pressure. That's something young guys figure out as they go. Did not look great when he was pressured against Indiana. We'll see how that looks this week against Miami with that great matchup. All right, Tony, wide receiver, corner, another one of those one-on-one matchups you try to find. And Keontae Scott is a pretty good corner for Miami. And Carnell Tate could be the first wide receiver off the board in this year's draft. We'll see how it all breaks down when we get to the postseason process. But that should be a fun matchup to watch when and if they get lined up against each other.
Or Keontae Scott against Jeremiah Smith. The only reason I put Jeremiah Smith now is because he's not draft eligible like Julian Sayin. But the fact is this, we talked about this matchup before the Big Ten title game. D'Angelo Pons, the smaller cornerback from Indiana, how would he match up against Carnell Tate and eventually Jeremiah Smith? And he did a great job. Now, Keontae Scott's been a bit nicked up late in the season. He did play a little bit in the Texas A&M game. He's an Auburn transfer. That's been a major find. He's been a terrific defensive back. He was good at Auburn. He just took his game to another level. But again, going up against those big-bodied, dependable Ohio State receivers that break big plays, it's going to be a huge challenge for Scott if he's on the field and he's fully healthy.
No question about it. And then on the other side, a potential top 15 pick, offensive tackle for Miami. Maybe he'll be a guard in the NFL. We'll have to wait and see. Francis Maui-Noah going up against the likes of Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry, two of those very talented edge rushers for Ohio State, Tony.
Jackson's getting better and better. I mean, he was a force late in the year. He's a tall, athletic guy. He can stunt, he can twist, he can bend the edge. He's got to get a little bit stronger, but he's a little bit younger. I'm hearing there's a very good chance he could enter the draft. I know that he has people who are kind of probing as far as agents are concerned and what type of grade he's going to get. I have him as an early second-round grade. And if it's not Kenyatta Jackson, it's Caden Curry, who was Ohio State's best defensive lineman in that Indiana game.
He was unbelievable in that game. Oh, man, he was all over the field.
He's a lot like Jack Sawyer. He's not the greatest athlete in the world, but he's a hard-revving, high-motor defensive end that finds ways to get the job done. And, You had the Grant Smith against Indiana, who was a solid offensive tackle. Mariota is going to be a top 15 pick. He could be the first tackle off the board. I have the Utah kid as my number one tackle, but I'm sure Mariota will challenge to be the first offensive lineman. You said guard. That's a possibility. We'll see what his arm length is. But he's really good. So this is going to be a big challenge for both of the Ohio State defensive ends.
Yeah, it should be a fun game. Looking forward to it. Ohio State obviously trying to win their second consecutive national championship after losing that Big Ten title to Indiana. So let's go now to the games on New Year's Day, Tony. But first, a reminder, Moody's is a proud part of the New York Giants, uniting the brightest minds to turn today's risks into tomorrow's opportunities. Learn more at Moody's.com. Orange Bowl, Tony. Oregon and Texas Tech. Texas Tech with the bye. Oregon with that easy, kind of sleepy win in round one of the college football playoffs. And we're going to start with the pass rushers for Texas Tech in this game, Tony. They're good. David Bailey could be a top 10, top 15 pick. Romello Height, and they'll have to challenge Isaiah World. I know a guy you're probably a lot higher on than maybe some others in the Seattle community.
Well, this will be the first iteration of this matchup, right? Because all these guys, David Bailey and Isaiah World, are slated to play at the Senior Bowl. So, Isaiah World, as far as I'm concerned, is the top left tackle in this draft. He's elevated his game since transferring to Oregon from Nevada. He's got long arms. He's fluid. He can slide off the edge. What I was really impressed about him this year compared to the 2024 season is he seemed to really develop a nasty attitude. We saw him really step up his game against Penn State when Oregon won that game in overtime. It's going to be a different battle against David Bailey because Bailey has really checked all the boxes this year. Dave Bailey is a guy who really elevated the game.
Absolutely.
Came from transferred from Stanford. He's your undersized, 6'3", 245-pound, probably going to stand over tackle as a pass rush linebacker on Sunday. But if you watch Bailey, he's never overwhelmed by offensive linemen. Even though he gives away 80 pounds at a time, these offensive linemen, he holds his ground. He's never smothered at the point of attack because he plays big, strong football. Romello Height is sort of a miniature version. He's going to be a later round pick, but he can also rush the passer. I mean, this is really a knockout matchup. This is David Bailey establishing himself as a top 10, top 12 pick, or possibly Isaiah World announcing to the world that, hey, I'm going to be a top 32 pick in the bottom half of round one because I'm the best pass protector in this draft.
No question, Tony. I think you're 100% right about that. It'll be a fun matchup to watch. And then maybe the most important player to watch in this game has to be Dante Moore, the quarterback out of Oregon, especially for Giant fans now, as they sit with the number 2 pick in the draft, unlikely to get the top overall pick. If it turns out to be a 2-quarterback draft and Dante Moore goes back in, they could trade down. So very important that he plays well as he continues to mold that decision as to whether or not he decides to come out in the draft this year, especially if he faces some pressure from those edge rushers from Texas Tech.
For years, Texas Tech was the fun and gun, put up 50 points, but they've got a great defense. I mentioned Romello Height. I mentioned David Bailey. You also have Jacob Rodriguez, who I'm sure they're going to use as a spy to spy on Dante Moore. How does he do against the pressure? Does he keep his eyes downfield looking for receivers, or is he looking for the pass rushers? When he gets outside the pocket, where is his head? Is he looking around? Does Texas Tech get him rattled where on passing downs, he's only staring at his primary target and he's slow going through his progressions? Those are going to be all things to look for. And, we'll see about Dante Moore. I think the big knock on him is, the lack of starting experience. Started, 5 games at UCLA. It started 12 games this year at Oregon. This can quell a lot of doubters because Texas Tech has such a good defense.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Jacob Rodriguez, someone you're keeping an eye on, Tony.
Yeah, another Jacob Rodriguez story. He's a smaller, again, off-ball linebacker, very explosive. A lot of people thought he was going to be in the conversation or would have gotten an invitation to New York as one of the 4 Heisman finalists. I never believed that, but it's still a good story. He's a terrific player. And like I said, I'm sure you'll hear that Texas Tech is going to use Rodriguez to spy on Dante Moore, keep Dante Moore in front of him, follow him when he gets outside the pocket. or on those design quarterback runs, go after him. So that's going to be an interesting aspect to watch. And again, if Rodriguez does it well, it's going to give pause to scouts to say, hey, you know what? Maybe we have to go back and rewatch this guy and regrade him.
Yeah, and look, he might also have to deal with tight end Kenyon Sadiq, who could be the first tight end off the board, and a lot of people think he's a first round pick. You have him more of a second round player, very athletic, uh, young player too. But you were interested in that matchup and also how he does against Terrence Carter Jr.
What I'm interested in this is you said everything. What the talking points are with Kenyon Sadiq. He's athletic. He's explosive. He's a good blocker. He's a terrific pass catcher. He doesn't have much experience. But Texas Tech has an outstanding tight end by the name of Terrence Carter Jr., who came by way of Louisiana. And Louisiana was basically a run-first offense where he was asked to block, and he did a good job. Now he goes to Texas Tech, which likes to put the ball in the air, and he's really showed himself to be a terrific pass catcher. He's very athletic. My point in this matchup is everyone talks about Kenyon Sadiq, and they kind of they dismiss, ignore, or don't even know about Terrence Carter. This is an opportunity for Terrence Carter to introduce himself really to the rest of the country and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm not Kenyon Sadiq, but I should be in the conversation as a day two pick at the tight end position.
Yeah, we had Drew Fabianich on a few weeks ago. If the fans haven't watched that, you should go and do it. He runs the Senior Bowl. He loves this tight end class this year, Tony. And it's turned out to be he might not have a ton of first round guys, but it's very deep.
Starting in round two, round three, round four, they're athletic. They're terrific pass catchers. They're not great blockers, but that's the way the position has gone the past 10 years. You get, if you want a blocking tight end, you get them in the sixth or seventh round, but they're not bad blockers. They're just not asked to block that much. A good motion. I think with Terrence Carter, he's actually a very good inline blocker. And Sadiq has also shown the ability to block.
It's funny, Tony. You go through these first two games, all these potential first round picks for Oregon, Ohio State, some from Miami, even. Then you get to these next two games, and I'm going to speak generally first before we hit the matchups. You look at Alabama and Georgia, and I think it kind of is one of the reasons why this draft class might not be as strong as other years. You might only have two first-round players combined from those two schools this year, depending if Ty Simpson comes out or not. Maybe you could get to three, but it's just not the same type of draftable talent from Alabama and Georgia that we've seen in past years.
Not only in quantity but quality as well. I mean, Alabama or Georgia almost every year have a player in the top 15, if not the top 10. And I think even if Ty Simpson enters the draft, they're not going to have a player from Alabama and Georgia won't breach the top 15. There are a lot of people who like C.J. Allen. I think he's going to be a first round pick. We'll see how early he goes. Depending on what you think of Anthony Hill of Texas. But you're right on that. And it's both quality and quantity from these two programs that traditionally would put 4 or 5 guys into the first round.
Yeah, and Caden Proctor will probably be the first guy off the board for Alabama. Who knows how high he's going to go given the type of year that he's had. All right, so let's get into the matchup. Rose Bowl, Alabama and Indiana, Tony. Very exciting matchup. And we got to see how this Indiana passing attack with Fernando Mendoza, Omar Cooper Jr., Elijah Surratt does against what's always a pretty talented Alabama secondary.
We'll see if Indiana can run the ball and how much is put on Fernando Mendoza's plate. Is he asked to basically carry the offense on the shoulder? Is Roman Henby able to run the ball against Alabama, which would open things up for Fernando Mendoza? But Indiana has the advantage here with the guys that you mentioned. Obviously, Mendoza is probably going to be the first pick of the draft, if not the second pick of the draft. And two terrific receivers. Cooper is the smaller, quicker, explosive, speedier guy. You remember the catch he made against Penn State to win that game that went viral? Elijah Surratt had that big catch in the Big Ten game Big Ten title game when Amari Cooper was on the sidelines. The Alabama secondary, I think, is indicative of what you said about how there's not a lot of great talent coming from that school this year. Keon Saab, he's a real good safety. Bray Hubbard is a guy who makes a lot of plays with his head. He's not a terrific athlete. Domani Jackson, the cornerback, 2 years ago, people were talking about him as a potential first-round pick. Who knows if he's going to get drafted? If he gets drafted, it's going to be late because he's been so inconsistent and he's just disappeared. So, the talent is there for Alabama. They just haven't played to the level of talent where I think Indiana with Mendoza, Cooper, and Surratt have exceeded expectations.
Dan, Tony, you mentioned in the Big Ten championship game that Indiana pass rush got after Julian Sayin. Unfortunately, Stephen Daly hurt, not going to play in this game. We are going to see Mikael Kamara, and we got to see how Ty Simpson handles pressure again. That's been a story all year. When he doesn't have a clean pocket, how does he play? And how does Caden Proctor handle what is a pretty serious pass rush from this Indiana defense?
A chance for Caden Proctor to prove the doubters like me wrong that he can play left tackle. And he's going against Mikael Kamara, who for 2 years now has terrorized the opposing quarterbacks. Kamara only goes about 6'1.5", 265 pounds. And when he times the timing day, he's probably going to run in the 4.8s. He's not a physical specimen, but what he is he's intense. He goes hard every single snap, and he gets the most from his ability. And it's not just wide edge rushers. He has an inside move. If you watch I mentioned it earlier, the Big Ten title game, they're twisting him, they're stunting him on the inside. He's getting between the A gap to get pressure. It's going to be a battle for Ty Simpson because Kamara finds ways to make plays, and it's going to be a battle for Proctor to be able to handle Kamara's quickness and explosion, and the fact that he's constantly going every snap of the ball.
And then, Tony, if you saw D'Angelo Pons, you mentioned him earlier in the show. He did a nice job in that Big Ten title game against a very talented Ohio State wide receiver group. And he'll have a chance to go up against another guy that's probably going to be a day 2 pick, I would say, more likely than not. Jeremy Bernard, the wide receiver from Alabama, who's been a really good possession receiver. Quiet in their first round playoff game, but then came up big with the catch late in that game.
Yeah, and Bernard, they're basically Simpson. Bernard feeds off of Simpson. Simpson's playing well. Bernard will play well. But again, with Pons, 5'8" and change, but plays big football. And he's got terrific ball skills. Outstanding ball skills. Gets his head back around, tracks the pass in the air, great timing, terrific move on the throw. Doesn't get called for pass interference, like a lot of these other guys do. Just terrific ball skills. But the fact is he's short. So, you think that there's going to be a mismatch against the taller receivers, which he disproved against Ohio State. He came up with several big plays. Listen, if D'Angelo Pons was 6'1", 190 pounds, he's the top cornerback in this year's draft. He is very likely a top 10 pick, but it's 5'8" and change, so you're looking at him as a nickelback, but he's still a real good corner.
And Tony, we didn't talk about it a ton, but this is also a big day for Fernando Mendoza. I know a lot of people, because he won the Heisman and what he's done, won the Big Ten, all that stuff, they just pencil in that he's going to be the first quarterback taken in this year's draft. And I've been warning people that if Dante Moore has a monster college football playoff run here and Fernando Mendoza fizzles out, there is, I bet you if you look at these preliminary boards around the NFL, it's probably maybe not more than half, but you're probably looking at 10 to 12 teams that might have more ranked ahead of Mendoza at this point, to be honest with you.
There's no doubt in my mind, and I was not a Moore guy coming into the season.
I know you weren't.
It took me a while to really warm up to Moore, but the more I watched them, the more I like the playmaking ability. But I think the bottom line is the fundamental thing that you're saying is I absolutely think that's why I said Fernando Mendoza very likely the first or second pick of the draft, because Dante Moore could be the first quarterback selected. I absolutely think that's a possibility. I think outside, I like Mendoza, but I think Moore is a little bit more mobile. I think he gives you more rolling outside the pocket, more with those design quarterback runs. It's not that Mendoza's bad at it, because he's very good at it. It's just that Moore is better at it. I also think Moore probably has a higher upside than Mendoza.
All right, Tony, let's get now to our final game, the Sugar Bowl, Ole Miss and Georgia. Ole Miss, once again, lost their head coach. Obviously, Lane Kiffin moving on. But a chance to finally beat one of these, traditional powers in the SEC. Ole Miss has had so many good years, but it always seems like whenever they end up taking on these big teams in big spots, they come up a little bit short. But they'll have a chance to do it against the Georgia team. We talked about before, C.J. Allen could be a first-round pick. After that, you might not even have a round 2 player coming out of Georgia this year. So this, I think, is a real opportunity, even without their head coach. You are going to have Charlie Weiss Jr. back there calling plays for them, which I think will help. Can Trinidad Chambliss get over the hump here and beat Georgia in the college football playoffs?
Oh, yeah, I think they're going to want to do it in spite of their head coach. I think that's motivating Mississippi is to say, hey, listen, the hell with you, Lane Kiffin. We're going to run the table. And they lost a close game to Georgia earlier in the season. So they should learn from that. I mean, Trinidad Chambliss has been a find this year. It's going to be an interesting story when Mississippi's season is finally over, because I know that Chambliss is petitioning the NCAA to get an extra year of eligibility. Right now, it doesn't look like that's going to happen, which means he's going to end up in the draft. But I mean, Kirby Smart puts a lot of defensive looks out there. He confuses the opposing quarterback. Trinidad Chambliss has stepped up time and time again this year in big spots for Mississippi. He's not the tallest guy in the world. He's sort of maybe like the D'Angelo Pons at the quarterback position, but there's a lot to like about him. I think CJ Allen's definitely going to be a first round pick from what I'm hearing. He could go earlier than a lot of people think. We've seen this type of linebacker in the past come out of Georgia. These guys that are great off the ball, sideline to sideline, in coverage, and can blitz when required to. And Allen checks all those boxes.
Yeah, this could be the year of the off-ball linebacker in the NFL draft. We hadn't had one of these drafts in a while. Finally, it's here. We already talked about Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese. You mentioned Anthony Hill from Texas. You got C.J. Allen. We've talked about Perkins on previous shows as well. A lot of good players that play off-ball linebacker, which is desperately needed in the National Football League, where that is really a tough decision to play.
Even in the middle late rounds, you mentioned Wade Wadaz of Clemson. You're talking about him as a day 3 pick right now. We mentioned it earlier in the Hawaii Bowl, Cade Ulavi. I mean, I think he's a 3rd round pick, but because of the numbers, he could end up in the 4th round. So it's not just the guys at the top. You're going to have good off-ball linebackers that can be starters in the NFL, 3rd, 4th, and 5th round.
You mentioned the Ole Miss quarterback, Tony, but their wide receivers, and again, this is not, we see some really good receivers come out of Ole Miss. This is not kind of that group, but seeing what they do against what's always a good Georgia secondary should be a lot of fun.
2 transfers. I mean, as with Trinidad Chambliss, Dejon Stribling from Oklahoma State came in with first-round grades or early second-round grades from scouts. Didn't have the great production, but he's a bigger possession receiver who consistently wins out for the contested throw. And then Harrison Wallace III, transferred from Penn State. It was shocking that Penn State didn't try and keep him with Drew Allard there, but he's more of your explosive down-the-field threat going up against Dylan Everett, the top cornerback or the top draftable cornerback from Georgia. Tall guy, explosive guy, a little bit slow getting his head back around at times to track the pass in the air. Does a lot of face guarding at times. This is a 1-2 punch at Trinidad Chambliss's availability here. Stribling is a stronger underneath receiver. Harrison Wallace is the guy that's will break the long play, and it's going to be up to Dylan Everett to stop whatever man he's over.
Tony, enjoy your college football playoffs, my friend. Always a pleasure. And then next week, we'll review all of these games, and we'll look ahead to the semifinals, which should be fun.
Look forward to it, John. Happy New Year, everybody.
Anything coming out on Essentially Sports, Tony? What do you have coming?
We've been doing team mock drafts and team needs. We'll be previewing these games a little bit more in depth, and whatever breaking news. I mean, there's probably going to be a lot of coaching changes in about 5 days' time in the NFL. That's going to be an interesting thing to check.
Yeah, and we are getting to deadlines, too, for declarations for kids that are not in the college football playoffs, right? So we'll know that it's some first couple weeks of January who's staying and who's going as we try to figure out what this draft class looks like. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmelk. That's Draft Season presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants. We'll see you next week, everybody. Happy New Year.